No one likes to do their chores. Yes, cleaning is important, but let's just be honest. We'd rather spend our time doing something more interesting. Wouldn't it be better if we had robots that were really good at cleaning up after us? Well, Google have been quietly working on this very problem, and they've taken a huge step forward when it comes to bringing us our very own cleaner robot. In summary, Google's proposal has two key parts: reinforcement learning and the trajectory optimization framework. The first part involves teaching the robot how to wipe down surfaces effectively, using rewards and punishment. The second part involves using algorithms to decide the best sequence of movements to clean the physical surface. Don't worry about any of the technical jargon. Google's paper had more jargon than a graduate's LinkedIn profile. I'll explain everything in simple terms. So you might be thinking, wiping down a surface isn't that hard, right? I mean, for us humans it is pretty easy, but translating these repetitive tasks to robots are actually pretty hard. And it's because we don't know enough about our own brains to teach the robots in the same way we learn. So researchers have to get a bit more creative with their approach. Just consider the sheer number of different variables that need to be factored in. We call this dimensionality. You've got to think about the position of the robot's effector, which is another way of saying its hand to wipe down the surface. Then you've also got to think about the shape of the surface being wiped. Then there's a total amount of spillage or even crumbs on the table that need to be cleaned up. So you can see there's a ton of challenges that Google needs to overcome. So Google decided against training a single model to collect and map all the possible variable inputs to their corresponding correct outputs, because there's just too many of them. And as the number of input increases, it becomes more difficult to capture patterns in the large dataset to actually train the robot. So instead, Google used this high-level approach. In essence, there are 4 key steps. Step 1 is sensing the environment. The robot needs to be able to see its environment and understand how far it is from other objects. And Google used LiDAR to do this. LiDAR emits laser pulses on objects. Sensors are then used to measure how long it takes for the light pulses to return. By doing this, alongside processing camera images, the robot is able to make a 3D space of its surroundings. This is known as the point cloud data. Think of LiDAR as acting as a flashlight. When you use a flashlight, you can see how far things are relative to you. LiDAR emits light pulses and detects those reflections to see how far things are and map its surroundings. So once you get this input data, or point cloud data as it's called, you then need to have it processed, and they're able to do so using a neural network. With lots of input provided over time, it can detect patterns all by itself. These patterns can include edges and corners of an object, eventually enabling the robot to learn things like, that's a table and that thing there is a chair. So think of a neural network as a detective, scanning different parts of evidence to identify patterns. So after the robot processes the environment and detects a mess on the table, the next step is to plan how to actually clean it up. This is what step 2 is all about. Using its input data, like the image of a spill for example, the robot would figure out how to actually wipe the table. And the robot needs to learn how to adapt to different situations, because in different scenarios, where the spill is could be different and how the spill actually behaves could also be different. And to address this challenge, Google researchers used a new stochastic differential equation, or SDE for short. The SDE is a mathematical equation to generate randomness. It's used to simulate how the dirt particles would actually move across the table before the robot starts wiping it down. And then using this information, the robot can plan its cleaning path and its wiping action. And through reinforcement learning, based for example on how much dirt was left on the table after wiping it down, it would use this feedback to assess whether the wiping action was actually good or bad. Because the robot has sensors which can detect dirt particles, so the environment can give feedback to the robot to see how well it's actually doing. Step 3 here is saying it needs to calculate the angles the robot's arm and other joints need to actually move. Doing all of this helps the robot make the optimal set of wiping actions. So this is factored into the trajectory optimization framework. And I've talked about the wiping movement of the robot, but what about the actual force it applies on the surface? A software component called the admittance controller is used to make sure the robot is consistently applying the right amount of force. That way the robot is actually effective at wiping down different surfaces. And let's actually see the results. Google researchers compared their approach to wiping actions based on rule of thumb and more traditional ways of wiping down surfaces. For example, more traditional ways would involve wiping down towards the center of the table. Google's approach enabled the robot to wipe down spills as well as crumbs more reliably without accidentally pushing any dirt off the table, as well as avoiding collisions with obstacles like chairs. Google researchers found that their reinforcement learning approach led to the robot needing fewer wiping actions to clean down the surface, And another major plus was that Google researchers claimed that their approach can be applied directly to physical robots without the need for any further training or modification. And while these results are promising, there are still some challenges to discuss. Google validated their approach both in simulation and on actual hardware, but it would be good to get more confidence in its cleaning approach in different environments. How would it perform if there were moving obstacles in an environment, like say a dog walking by in the kitchen? How would a robot perform if the lighting was really bad? How expensive would a robot like this actually be for people like you and me? Would the unit economics ever make sense? But with that being said, this is early research. This isn't ready for mass production yet, so this doesn't take any of the shine away of Google's breakthrough when it comes to making cleaning robots. And what I love about these things is that we're effectively witnessing history being made. Think about an elderly disabled person that can rely on a cleaning robot that can do its chores for them. Now it may sound far-fetched, but we are making steps towards that. And we've seen recently big breakthroughs in technology, so don't be too surprised if it does happen. I'm Vas, and if you're still here, you're an absolute legend. Thank you for watching.